I think a lot of you know who I am anyway, don't you? I don't know if there's anybody out there who doesn't know what I do, but I just want to tell you a little bit anyway, because I do have a lot of new information that I want to talk about because I am writing the new book now. I've been working on it for quite a while, but it is finally beginning to get into chapter form, which is a beginning to the end of the process, let's say it that way. My problem is that I get so much information. Then I have to decide what am I going to put in the books and what am I going to leave out. And then it always means there's going to be another book after that and another one after that. Because with the Convoluted Universe series, each one of them had too much material. And I had to pull out chapters, and I said, well, then when I started Convoluted 2, I already had 3 or 4 chapters for the beginning of that book. And the same thing happened now. I began pulling out a lot of material. And I am getting so much material, it keeps pouring out of people, that I'm trying to use the what's different. And every one of my books, has different material in it. And so now I'm deciding I'm going to pull out all the UFO material and have that to the side because there's just too much. And Lou Farish, I worked with him on the UFO conference in Eureka, was telling him about that, and he said, well, why don't you call it convoluted UFOs? Okay. So I don't know, but it's a totally different way of looking at them. So I thought, well, the book's already too big. I'll put them over here to the side. But as most of you know, I'm a hypnotherapist. I really my specialty is therapy, working with people. And I get clients now that come from all over the world. It's amazing, in that little bitty town of Huntsville over here, 2,000 people, one little motel, and little granny's restaurant, they come from all over. I've had one come from China just to do a session and then go back. And it's amazing. I've even had actors sneak in from Hollywood, try to remain unknown, just to have a session so they could sneak out of town again. And I have doctors and scientists and psychiatrists and about every walk of life you could imagine, because I found nobody is without problems. And most of what I do is the therapy. But I call it past life therapy because that's mostly what I focus on. And I've been doing hypnosis now for 40 years. So I started a long time ago, way back in the early days when it was watch the shiny object, which is not used anymore in the long, drawn-out inductions from relaxing your big toe all the way up the body. None of that is done anymore. But I did have the background in that. But then I had to put it on the back burner while I raised a family. And a lot of you probably know my husband was in a wheelchair for 25 years. He was hurt in the service. And so I took up a lot of my time spending with him and raising the kids. So I had to put everything on the back burner. So it was about 30 years ago I got back into it. And I knew there were newer methods. So I began to study. The newer methods have to do with visualization and imagery. And that is ended up what I've been doing. But I found out as I worked with this, there was a lot in the normal hypnosis that did not need to be there. It's time consuming, you don't need it. And so I began to take out things and replace it with other things that I found worked. As long as you're not harming the client, you're free to experiment. Because somebody had to start this in the beginning anyway. Somebody had to figure out how to do it. So I said, most of the people out there who were teaching hypnosis are just repeating what they were taught by somebody else, by somebody else, by someone else. They don't even question why they're doing it. They don't question how they could do it different or why they are doing these different things. So I began to adapt my own technique. And this took place over, well, it had now been 30 years. And I've been many years perfecting it as I found what worked and what didn't work. And now I'm teaching the technique all over the world. And more and more people are learning it because I had so much demand on my time. I knew I was never going to be able to do all these sessions. The list was just getting longer and longer. The only way I could do the sessions was when I was traveling and doing lectures, and I would only have a few days in each place. And then I finally opened an office in Huntsville, that little bitty town over there, and now I'm seeing people regularly. I've had that office now for 3.5 years. But before that, it was just, I'd have to do it on the road. So they, and I'm going to tell you who they are, they told me to start teaching. They said they didn't want me to travel so much. I was on the road every week to a different conference, and sometimes 3 in a week. Sometimes I wouldn't even come home. I would just go from city to city doing conferences. And it was getting stressful, and I was under a lot of stress. And they were telling me, we don't want you to travel as much anymore. We want you to teach and to write. And I said, well, if I'm going to teach, that means I'm going to have to travel. And they said, no, do it when you're right here and let them come to you. And I said, they're not going to come here. So I started teaching in here in this hotel, and they were coming from all over the world. So that's what they want me to do, is focus on that more. So I've cut my lecturing and traveling back now. They said, try not to do more than 2 a month. And so I've got it down pretty much to that. But I still go all over the world, and I go out of the country at least once a year, or take at least a month or 6 weeks that I'm out of the country. Because the books are now in about 20 different languages, and they're being translated into more all the time. So I have to go where the books are. And this last year alone, I spoke in India at the International Hypnosis Conference in New Delhi, and I got to see the Taj Mahal on that trip. But then I went back to Russia, because Russia is translating more and more of the books, and Amsterdam. And I gave my first class with a translator in Moscow last year, and I didn't know how that was going to work. But it seemed to, I guess they got the message. It was a class of doctors over there that I'm working with. Doctors and psychiatrists are wanting to learn this method. I am working with a group of doctors in Moscow who are trying to unite all of the natural healers, herbalists, healers of any kind all over the world. They want to put it into some basic organization to where it will be accessible all over the world. And I think this is going to be very good. And these are regular doctors, and they are switching over to the alternative. And this is what they're trying to stress. So I'm busy doing a lot of things anyway. But the classes have become important now. But when I began the technique, what I developed, I work in the somnambulistic level. If anybody knows anything about trance, as PMH was showing you the levels, this is theta, the deepest level before you fall asleep in delta. Now, most hypnotists are trained to work in the very light levels. They say, you don't want to go near that somnambulistic level. Strange things happen there. Well, if you read my books, you know strange things happen there. But they're afraid they can't control it, so they don't want to work in that level. But to me, that's where all of the knowledge is and all of the information is. So I put the people into the deepest possible level of trance, which is the somnambulistic level. Now, they say the odds are 1 out of 20 or 1 out of 30 people will go spontaneously into that level when they're having a hypnosis session. Well, the technique that I've been able to perfect, it's the opposite. 1 out of 20 or 1 out of 30 will not go. I found a way to make every one of them drop. Now, you see the importance of this because you can eliminate the conscious mind interference. If you've ever had hypnosis with the light levels, you know, your mind is sitting there jabbering at you. This is silly, you're making it up. You read it in a book, you saw it in a movie, yak, yak, yak. You can eliminate that conscious mind interference and go direct to where the information is. Look at what you can get. And that was what I began to do, and I was very excited because in the early days, it was all about exploring history. I love history. And I had people going back to different time periods. To me, it was like time travel, because when they're in the somnambulistic level and they go into a past life, they become the other person totally. This life does not exist anymore for them. If you have asked them a question about an object or anything in their time period that is in our time period that does not exist in their time period, they won't know what you're talking about. And you've read my books, you'll notice this. There are many times that I will say something and they want to know what it is. What are you talking about? So, and that's a challenge too. I found just about everyone I've taken to the Middle Ages, and I would mention the word glass when we're wanting for descriptions, you don't know what glass is. And they'll say, what is that? And you have to think off the top of your head, how do I describe something that is so common to us, but it's unfamiliar to these people in another time period? But to me, that's so fascinating to be able to do that kind of research, because I consider myself the reporter, the investigator, the researcher of lost knowledge. So I want to know everything about everything. So you can imagine if you've got a person into a time period in history, what you'd want to ask them. I want to know everything about them. And then when I write the book, I research it to death. Only after I'm finished, then I find out everything about everything dealing with the subject. And that's where I love that. To me, to be in a library and doing research is heaven. A lot of you wouldn't think so. But I can spend all day in a library looking for one little piece of information, and that is where I really come alive. I love that. When I wrote my Nostradamus books, I read every book ever written on Nostradamus. When I wrote the Jesus book, I read every book ever written on the Dead Sea Scrolls. But that way, even if I don't use it all, and I did a lot of repetition in all these books, I know what I'm talking about and I know what I'm writing about. And I know PMH appreciates this because of her love for research. But that was what I was doing in the early days, was the history, because that was what they were doing, going back to historical times. But even in the somnambulistic level, and I call time travel, if the person, they're not always going to know everything. They may just be a farmer out in a field, but they get the answer for what they're looking for in the therapy, because we take them to the lifetime that is the most appropriate for the life they're living now. They won't always know a lot, but occasionally I would find somebody in a position who had knowledge that we could write about. They knew things that were happening or were associated with an important person. That's where I've written those books, but I've now done thousands and thousands of people, and it's amazing the way the technique keeps going, and it is working every time. Now, a lot of the information PMH got, I received my way, and I admire her with her scientific lust for this. Mine comes from a different direction. But still, if we are getting the same information, I think that gives it validity. It has to be coming from the same place if we're all getting the same information. Doesn't matter how it happens. But mine is not channeling, but I have discovered a very strange thing happening with it that I use now all the time. In the beginning, it was just history. Then I got into the therapy. What I work with, I call the subconscious mind. But it's not the way the psychiatrists define the subconscious. Well, their definition of the subconscious is a childish part of the mind. What a lot of hypnotists use when they're trying to stop smoking, lose weight. To me, that's boring anyway. I'll put it in if the person wants to stop smoking or lose weight, but that's not my prime interest. Because to me, that's so easy to do. I found a very easy way to do it. I tack it on at the end of the session. But that's not the part of the mind that I'm working with. I have found this part, you may call it the higher self, the higher consciousness, the oversoul. I think it's what the psychiatrist, what was it, Jung? I never remember if it's Jung or Jung. He called the universal mind, before he got away from all of that. It is something that is so huge and so big, it has the answers to everything. So why not go to something like that if you want to find answers? And it's so amazing to me. I call it the subconscious. It answers to it. It says, we don't care what you call us, we'll work with you, it doesn't make any difference. But so I call it the subconscious. One time I asked them, who am I speaking to? And they said, you could call us the collective if you want. It always kind of makes you think of the Borg on Star Trek. But it is a force, it's so huge that it knows absolutely everything. So that's the part that I work with. And I found it only to be accessible when I get the people into the deepest possible level of trance. I take them through their therapy first because we're looking for the cause of something. I do a lot with physical problems and diseases, illnesses. There's just about every kind of physical thing you could think of. I've had people come to me. Many of them are getting ready to have operations. If they can get to us before they're going to have the operation, they won't need the surgery because we find out why they're having it done. Because you make yourself sick. You give yourself the disease or the illness. If your mind is that powerful enough to make you sick, it's also powerful enough to cure you, what you understand. Because I found every ache, pain, symptom of the body is the subconscious trying to give you a message, trying to tell you something in the only way it knows how. Pain, it's going to get your attention, and we don't understand what it's trying to tell us. So it'll get a little worse, and a little worse, still trying to get your attention. And if we still don't understand what it's trying to say, it can end up with an illness or disease that's going to be a lot harder to fix, usually into surgery or all these drugs and things. The doctors are only putting a Band-Aid on the symptoms. They're not going to the cause of the person's problem. This is part of what OT was writing about also. You got to find out, why did the person choose to make themselves sick? And people can come in to see me and talk about different parts of their body they're having trouble with. I can usually tell them what's happening in their life because the subconscious will always affect the same part of the body to give the person the message. It's very literal. And if you think about it, it makes a lot of sense. And so that's why we go back to the past lives to find out why are they doing this? Where's it coming from? A lot of it comes from trauma, where the person died in another life, and they carry that forward into this life. But, even, I'm not trying to watch my time. I don't have as much time as I gave the other people. But somebody comes in with back problems. It's always the same thing. Shoulder, back, down the spine, especially into the lower back. Can you figure out what that would mean in this life? The subconscious is very literal. I always ask them, do you feel like you're carrying a load? And they usually are. They got a job they don't like, they got a marriage they don't like, they're too busy, they feel like they are carrying the world on their back. The spine is your support system. And usually that's what it goes back to. Sometimes it's just understanding what it is. People with leg, knee, ankles, hip problems, it's usually the same thing. They are at a crossroads where they're being offered a chance to go a different direction. It may be a big change in their life. It might be something they are not sure if they want to do it because they will give up something. And they're trying to make up their mind, do I want to do this or not? And they're holding back. They're holding back, they create pains in those areas. And people end up with knee operations and hip operations, and It's just as simple as trying to find out what it is and make them make the decision. Now, this side of the body, the right side of the body, refers to now, things that are happening right now in your life. The left side of the body is holding on to things in the past. So if you have pains on that part of your body, it's something to do with letting go of something in the past. And all these things have been told to me in my work. That's why I go with, that's the past, this is the now. Arthritis in your hands. What is it you don't want to let go of? What are you holding on so tightly for? See how literal this is? And a lot of times, see, I spend at least 2 hours or more just talking to the person before we ever have a session. Just doing therapy, getting to know them. And then it's like, what's going on in your life that's creating this? And sometimes they'll say, I don't have any problems. I just thought it'd be interesting to come, and have out of curiosity. But after we talk for about an hour, then they'll finally say, well, I do have something bothering me. Because they got to get to feel comfortable with you and know you, and then they can begin to tell you their real problems. So I do a lot of work with a physical. Now, that's what I'm talking about, the subconscious is this big oversoul, higher self, whatever you want to call it. I call them they, because they always refer to themselves as we when they communicate with me. They said, we can help unless the person has had an operation. It's because if something's been taken out, we can't put it back, which makes sense. They can do a lot. I have seen them in one of my classes just a few months ago in Chicago. The whole class watched as they rebuilt the cartilage in this woman's knee. She was due to have a surgery the next week. And they said, well, you know how difficult this is? And I said, I know, but I know you can do anything. And so they rebuilt the cartilage in her knees. And afterwards they said, no, she's going to go back to the doctor and they won't find anything wrong. And it was a lot. We were doing the whole thing. And then even during the session, it said, well, let's just do I call it a body scan. They said, let's do that and see if there's anything else. And they said, well, we're going to work on her heart while we're in here. And I said, what's wrong with her heart? He said, she's got a murmur. I said, that's not that bad. He said, yeah, but we'll fix it while we're here. And but because she was due to have a sonogram before she had the surgery anyway. But anyway, see, when these people wake up, they have no memory of what's going on. That's what I mean. You get that conscious mind out of the way. After she woke up, we had 20, 30 people in the class all crowded around the table watching her, had her on a massage table. And afterwards they said, you just performed a miracle. Don't you know you just performed a miracle? I said, I didn't do anything. They do it. And this is the kind of power that I work with. It's so vast and it has so much knowledge. And a lot of people want to have information about their marital problems, family problems. They come for all kinds of reasons. So we work with everything, and that's my therapy part. And the subconscious, I always ask them to take it back to the most appropriate past life to explain what's happening now. Because you've all had hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of lifetimes. Everybody has. You're going to get something. You can go to a hypnotist and have a past life. It's not hard to do if they know how to do it. But then what are they going to do with it? They don't follow through. It's just an interesting thing. I want to take you to the one that's going to explain what's happening now and then fix things. I like to fix the person. I don't want them to leave if they're not fixed. Does this sound strange? But I'm teaching it now, and my students are emailing me saying, it works, we're able to do it. And in the beginning, I didn't know, could I teach it to anybody? When you develop something, can you show somebody else how to do it? So I thought I'm going to try, but they are telling me now they are beginning to understand it. The doctors in Russia want me to come back and make sure they're doing it right. But there's no guarantee everyone's going to be able to do it. I think it takes a certain, I don't know, What I think it is, they are not going to work with you if you don't come at it from the right angle, the right reason. Because I kept saying, what if I teach this to someone and they use it in the wrong way? I don't think they're going to work with people if they're not using it for the right reasons. But this is what I'm going to get to next, is where my information comes from that I write about. Now, I've also had 20 years working with the UFOs and ET cases. So I wrote 4 books about that, and I've got theories that nobody else in the field has come up with, because we go to what's really going on. But anyway, I'm doing the session, and during the session, when we get to the subconscious part, and they start explaining, I have the person bring a list of questions, we go over the list of questions, and they're answering everything that is appropriate that they can. Sometimes it has a time factor and they can't tell the person everything. But it is always the same voice through everybody I work with. Same phraseology, same terminology, same words. Now, how are you going to explain that? It's different if someone is channeling one entity or something. This comes through everybody. Thousands of people, everybody I'm working with, it's the same, whatever you want to call it. It's too big to call a being. It's the same intelligence or whatever you want to say. And it knows me. To me now it's like having a conversation with an old friend. It's just like, hello, okay, now we'll get to work. But everybody I work with, it comes through. Now, the strangest thing that began to happen was toward the end of the session, they never interrupt the therapy, but toward the end of the session, they'll say, Dolores, this is the next piece of information you need for your next book. And they'll give me a theory that I've never heard of before. Sometimes it's interwoven into the whole session. Well, then that may be in England. I'll get home. A week later in the US, I do another person. They come through again and continue what they started in England to give me the rest of the theory, and this comes through person after person until I finally got what they want me to write about and want me to lecture on. And how are you going to explain that? That's what people don't understand. What I'm dealing with here is highly unusual, but it speaks the truth, and it's always the same information through everybody. Now, how can you explain it? Some people have said I must be lying, I have to be a fraud, it has to be a hoax. I don't know how anybody can say that. Even in my classes, I played different tapes from different people to show it sounds alike. And I have some people in the audience here I know have taken my class. And don't you agree, the ones who have taken the class, that there is something bigger than all of us that we're communicating with? So why not pass that on? They said this is a therapy of the future, that we're not going to need doctors, surgery, or anything. We're going to be able to help ourselves with our own mind. Anyway, they began giving me all of this information, and what I'm getting now, if I'd got it 20 years ago, I would never have understood it. They're very wise that way. They started me out 30 years ago. I've been more intense in the last 20 years ago. But 30 years ago, it was simple stuff. And it was like spoon feeding you. Give you a little piece of information and see if you can digest it. Then give you a little more and see how you handle that, and a little more. I had everybody that comes to see me wants to know one question: what's my purpose? Why am I here? What am I supposed to be doing? It's a universal question. Everybody wants to know it. We can find out if it's appropriate, because the subconscious says, suppose we told you too soon. Maybe what you're supposed to be doing is so radically different than what you're doing now. If you found out too soon, you'd say, oh, I don't want to do that. I'd never be able to do that. And you'd block yourself and sabotage yourself. So if you're not supposed to know, they will come through, and I ask that question, and they'll say it's not time. We can't tell them. If it is time, they'll tell you everything you need to know. But if it's not, they'll say it's not time. I had one man, they said that, and they said it's not time, but we can't tell him. But they said, oh, we wish we could. You don't know what we see. But they said, consider he is where you were 20 years ago. He said, you don't give a baby a 3-course meal. You start a baby out with milk, with cereal, crushed vegetables. You don't give a baby a steak. You have to spoon feed it little by little. And he said, he is where you were at that time. If I had got the information I was getting now, I probably would have stopped my whole practice and said, no, I don't understand this, it's too complicated, and I wouldn't have done any more. But I was led into it gradually to where I'm getting now the information for the Convoluted Universe series. You know, that was a total surprise. I wish I could go back sometimes to the easier days when it was just history, but they won't let me do it. It's just getting more and more complicated because I was doing the UFO material. This is in the book, The Custodians. And they were giving me all these theories about what was happening. And toward the end, suddenly they began getting into different metaphysical concepts. That's when I knew I was going to have to write another book, leading away from UFOs. And I started writing Convoluted Universe Book 1. And they kept giving me a little more and a little more, like, okay, if you understand this, digest this, we'll give you a little more. I still don't understand a lot of it. I tell them you're going to have to give me analogies, examples, so that I can be able to talk to people. I can't do it if it's so abstract that I don't understand what I'm talking about. So they do that. They will give me examples, but they said sometimes these are very poor examples because there's no words in our language for what they are actually trying to get across. They said, all of your questions will never be answered because some information is as poison rather than medicine. The human mind cannot handle it. They said, it's not the brain, it's the mind. The human mind has no concepts in it that can understand the totality of what it's really all about. And I know I'm getting more and more and more. I got one just a month ago in Montreal, and I said, for Pete's sakes, guys, what are you trying to do? You know, I keep thinking there's nothing else left to find. They've told it all to me. Then they throw another one at me. And so I know I'm not finished, but it's like, I have to understand this to explain it to people. That's the hard part. But that's when they began giving me the concepts as we went along, and a lot of it has to do with simultaneous time. Now, in order for me to understand these things, I have to still think linearly. And I think that's what most of us do because that's the way our minds are set up. We have to think day follows day, week, months, because we're in that concept. We can't think of everything happening at the same time. And I discovered that the first time when I did the Nostradamus material and found out that I was actually time traveling because they said he was living in his time period when I was communicating with him. I was not communicating with the dead. And they said, you must understand that. He is living while you were living. And you have to be careful because you're interfering in his life. You're being allowed to do it, but don't overstep the boundaries. And that was really hard for me to understand because he was so emphatic about it that Nostradamus didn't want to know how he was going to die. He didn't want to know his own future. And so I couldn't tell him things like that. So he was actually living in his life when we were doing the communication. But I didn't know anything about simultaneous time at that time. And people kept saying, explain it. I still don't really know a lot about it, but all I can say is what they tell me, what I report in the books. But a simultaneous time means everything is occurring at the same time. Past, present, future, and all of the probabilities and possibilities which are enormous, are all supposed to be happening at the same time. And I said, how can that be? We know we grow from a baby to a child to an adult. How can all these things be happening at the same time? They said that's because they're not happening at the same time. Happening, that denotes a beginning and an end. He said everything is existing at the same time. There's a difference. Whether that makes it any clearer or not, they said it's all existing at the same time. Now, it can get very complicated. And sometimes when I'm doing lectures, I try to judge the audience. I don't want to get over their heads. But now it's getting hard to do that because my information is getting more and more complicated. I used to try to keep it simple. I didn't want to blow their minds. That's why I say the Convoluted Universe series are for those people who want their minds bent like pretzels. And people, when I first came out, I thought, oh, they're not going to be ready for this. They ought to read the other ones first and lead up to it. But people jumped right in. And they said, maybe we don't understand it, but it makes us think. So I always tell them in the book, hey, I don't understand this, but I'm putting it out there. See if you can get anything out of it. But each book gets more and more complicated. But let me give you an example, because one thing I'm going to focus on tonight is the new earth we're moving into, but I want to get you some of these background first. Let me give you an example of one of the first things they told me that I was really, just when I think I have everything all figured out, is when they throw another curve at me. Even in the early days, I had reincarnation all figured out. I understood how it worked, and no problem. Then they threw in a concept I'd never heard of before. And it was like, well, wait a minute now, I've got it all figured out. You're throwing something in here, you're messing with my mind, you know. I don't understand this because it was totally opposite of what I believed. And then I got to thinking, if I didn't at least examine it, I wasn't any better than the church that says, this is what you believe, don't ask any questions, don't look any further. So I began looking at these new concepts, and as hard as they were to digest, they began to make some sense. Then I'd get another one and another one. And that's what I mean by spoon feeding me. A lot of people say they want to read my books in the order I wrote them, and they can see my evolution that I went through. But one of the things that they told me that was really hard to understand had to do with parallel universes and parallel lives. But I'll start out simple. Okay, they said, when all of us come to crossroads in our lives, we all do. A time in your life when you have to make a decision. You can go one way or the other. You can either maybe you want to get married, maybe you want to get divorced, maybe you want to get a different job, maybe you want to move. You know, we all come to those points in our lives as part of living. We have to make a decision. Do I go this way or do I go that way? And you all know if you would have gone the other way, your life would be totally different, wouldn't it? When you look back on it and said, well, if I would have made that other decision, I'd be doing this and this now. And sometimes it's better and sometimes it's not. But we all know that. Okay, we decide we're going to go this way. What happens to the energy we put into the other decision? Energy is alive. Energy creates. Everything is energy. Everything. Now, we decide to go this way. What happened to the other decision that you'd put so much energy in thinking, should I do that? What happens to that energy? What? The other reality is also created. You created it because you were thinking about it. In the other reality, another you is living out the other reality. That's the simple way. It is not only Big decisions. They said it happens every single time you make even the smallest decision. Should I go to the store or should I stay home? Should I cross the street or should I stay on this side of the sidewalk? Every time you make any decision at all, it splits again. And another you is acting out these other worlds and other decisions. And that could blow your mind. That's why you don't know about it. Can you imagine what that would be like if you knew all these things? And plus you have all your past lives, you have all your future lives, and this is now. This is all the probable things that are happening to you in this life. That's what they said. That's why we cannot know everything. We must focus on this life, this decision, this reality we created right here. Because to know the other things, we can't handle it. Our minds are just not capable of doing it. I have some people come to me who have had glimpses of what they think are their other selves, living in another city or something, and they kind of peek in on them sometimes. Well, that's very unusual, but that means they are having access to the other reality that their other part is living out. Now, see, so that's why I don't bring up some of these things at every conference, every lecture, because it's a little hard to digest, a little hard to understand. So I tell people, just let it, I said, treat it as mind candy, something to think about. You don't have to take it too seriously, but it is what they said happens. We focus on this one right now because this is the one we're living right now. But you can create any reality you want. Your mind is that powerful. You are a creator. Everything in your life you have put there. You have created and put there. A lot of people don't like to hear that because their lives are not exactly that good. And they said, what do you mean? I made myself miserable. I married the wrong guy and all these awful things happening. They have put in their life, you do. For whatever reason. Maybe it's karma. Maybe you're paying back for mistakes in another life. But you created the mess that you're in. If you realize that, you created your reality, that you can uncreate it by focusing on what you really want. What is it you really want to do? What do you really want to create? And that will be your reality. When you realize the mind is that powerful. And I've done whole lectures on just that subject because everything in my life, with my company, with my books, I've created it myself. So I know you can do it once you really know what you want to do. And you got to know what you want to do. You can't be vague. That's what a lot of people say, well, I'd like this, but you got to be specific down to the last detail, then you can have what you want in your life. You can create your own reality. But anyway, all these other probable selves out there, I always say I wish them luck anyway. Somewhere there's another me that never went into any of this. Probably still doing volunteer work in the hospital and staying home cooking, and I wish her luck, but I think she'd be boring, PMH has probably several other selves that didn't do this at all, But this is what we're focused on right now. Maybe it all comes together, I think it does, at the end when we finally all get back anyway. But these are things I wanted you to know because they're going to be coming up when I get to the new earth. Okay. Now, I've done whole lectures on life after death and what happens when you die, and I wrote the book Between Death and Life about how it feels when you die, where you go, and what it's like on the other side, the whole cycle. But what I have found, we all originated with God. We all originated with the same place. Now, I am having more and more people now who, instead of going into past lives, are going back to the source. They always call it the source. The source is the same thing that we call God. They're not bothering with past lives anymore. And I thought that was strange because all these years, it was always going back to past lives. Now they're not. When I put them under, they will go back to their beginning, when they were with God, when they were with the source. They all describe it the same way, which I think is amazing enough. And it is so wonderful, it's beyond belief. But maybe that's what we're supposed to be knowing now at this time, what it's really all about. But we started with the source. And even though some people a while ago was talking about they don't believe in the Big Bang, something happened where we all exploded out and we left the source. And all you really are is a spark. A tiny, tiny spark that left God. And when it comes right down to it, it's just that little tiny spark, and many, many people see themselves that way. And they'll see when they're with the source, it's total happiness. It's a feeling they can't describe. There's so much love. It's always described as a huge light. Some of them call it the great central sun. You've probably heard that expression. But it is always a huge, bright light. And they are in the light, and they feel so comfortable there. It's such a love that you can't even imagine, and they don't want to leave. And so I keep saying, well, if it's so beautiful, why did you leave? They said, because God needed a knowledge. And they sent us out as sparks to accumulate knowledge, to bring knowledge back to Him. And we were sent on our journeys. In this way, we're like cells in the body of God. We have to travel through every possible situation, every possible life, every possible universe, planets, everything you could imagine, and accumulate knowledge and bring that back. And that when we return to God is with everything we have learned in all of the lives we've ever experienced. That's when you can go home. And they always say, I want to go home, because they want to go back to the source. But every one of them, sometimes they start crying. They'll say, I'm home. It's so beautiful, it's so wonderful. And when they're there, they're all together. It's a wonderful togetherness. And when they are sent out as the spark, they're separated and they're lonely. They don't like it. And there's always that yearning sometimes in people, I want to go home. They don't know where home is, but they know it's not here. And it's that feeling of separatedness and being lost, so to speak. And you don't know how many emails and letters I get when people like that they don't want to be here. So you start out on your journey. You have to be everything. You have to experience everything before you can go back. It is a school. Earth is a difficult school. It's one of the hardest. They said Earth is a challenging planet. But you come here to mostly learn emotions and limitations. And a lot of other planets don't have to learn that. It's a planet that was given free will to see what you would do with it. And they sit there and shake their heads at what we're doing with it, because they cannot interfere. They have to allow us to make our own mistakes. And that's part of the free will. And we have to keep going and going, and that's what the learning is about. You make a mistake, hopefully you're not going to make the same mistake again, but you come back again. It's a school where you can skip a grade, but you can't I got that wrong. It's a school where you have to take a grade over, but you can't skip a grade. You can't go from kindergarten to college. You've got to take it step by step. If you don't pass the grade the first time, you're going to have to take it over again. And that's where people have the same things in their life again and again and again, and they keep drawing the same things to them. And until they figure out what it is they're trying to learn from that situation, it's going to keep happening in their life. Then when they finally figure it out, then things will change in their life. Oh, okay. They draw the same kind of men in their life. I have a lot of women doing that, you know, and other things like that. They keep having the same kind of jobs that they hate. Same situation over and over again until finally they'll say, all right, I don't need this, and they can move on. Then you go to the next lesson, which may or may not be easier. We don't know. But I tell people, you all have bad things happening in your life. Everybody does. But what did you learn from it? They don't even think about that. If you learned even one thing from that horrible thing that happened to you, that was what it was all about. Even one thing. So you think about it. We all have bad things, but then if you understand what it was trying to teach you, then that's what it's all about. Because they say there is no bad, there is no good, it's only energy. And what we do with the energy, and how we make mistakes and learn from them and go on to something else. And it's more complicated than that, but I don't want to spend too much time on that. I spoke for hours on just these little pieces I'm putting in here. Okay. But anyway, as you start out on your journey, you have been around forever. You were created in the very beginning. Everyone was created at the same time. You've been around forever. Earth is a young planet over here, isolated on purpose in this part of the galaxy. They don't want us to contaminate the rest of them out there. They don't want our violence to spread. They don't want us to do anything to the rest of the galaxy. So we're isolated over here on purpose. Now, this is just one of the schools you chose to come to. Before this, you've lived on other planets, other dimensions, places where you didn't even have a body. It was just an energy body. I've had every kind of life form you could imagine that people have gone into. Then finally you decide to come to Earth, and it's challenging here. They get here and they say, what was I thinking about? They said, this is horrible. They don't want to be in this body because they said it's slow, it's dense. They said, the other places I could think and I could have things happen instantaneously. What am I doing in this slow, dense world where nobody knows what's going on? Another thing I want to bring in before I forget, you know what they said, one of the big lessons of Earth is, when you come in, the memories are erased, as I was talking about with Grant. It's done that way on purpose. You've got to come in as a clean slate. I asked them one time, I said, wouldn't it be easier if we knew what we were coming in for, if we knew our relationships with other people, wouldn't that make it easier? They said, no, it wouldn't be a test if you knew the answers. Other planets, other beings, when they come to other planets, they remember the source. They remember God. They remember why they came. They remember all of their lives. Earth, they don't. They said, you come in here, a blank slate, start off fresh. They say, what greater test than to have people think they're all alone? What would they accomplish if they thought they were all alone and didn't have anybody else out there? That's one of the big tests of living on Earth. And you have to find your way back, which I think is what we're doing now. We're becoming more aware, the metaphysics, we're becoming more aware of this other worlds. It's not with the church. They say so much and they stop. But we're beginning to open up and know these things now. We're beginning to find our way back by ourselves. And that's what they want us to do, to think for ourselves and get back. I always tell people at a lecture, don't believe what I say. Don't believe what anybody else says. Think for yourself. Read and ask lots of questions. Then make up your own mind. If somebody tells you, I have the truth, the only truth, run the other way. Nobody has the truth. My truth is different than yours. But you find your own, ask questions, and then come to your own conclusions. That's what it's about, using your mind. But we have to find our way back. And sometimes it can take many, many lifetimes. We build karma. We have to come back and repay the karma time and time again. We get stuck, they said, in the muck and the mire, the mud. We get stuck in that. They said it's like flypaper. And we have to keep coming back again and again to get rid of that before we can progress. Now, my book's on Jesus. Jesus did not come to save anybody from their sins, because nobody can take away your karma. The only thing he came to save us from was the wheel of karma. He could see that we were going round and round, making the same mistakes again and again, and not progressing up the ladder like we were supposed to do. We were stuck. His idea was to come and show people what you were supposed to do to get off of the wheel. And it all goes back to love. Everything goes back to love. That's the highest force there is. But they didn't understand, and they killed him. That's all it is. Once you get off of this wheel, you have to progress, or you're stuck here. We don't want to be stuck here anymore, because there's big, big changes are happening. We want to be able to move with these changes. You can't as long as you're stuck up in karma. We have to get rid of the karma. They said the most thing you must do right now at this time is get rid of all your old karma and try not to make any more. And also to get rid of fear. Fear holds you back. And as you know, the government, everybody else tries to keep you in fear. Doctors, religion, everybody tries to hold you in fear. You must release the fear, get rid of the fear, and get rid of the karma if you're going to move. Because this is a big time. We can't move as long as this stuff is holding us back. But when you come here anyway, if you get to Earth, after you've done all these other lives on other places, this is not the only place. People are amazed that they found out they've had one other life on Earth. You've had hundreds and hundreds of lives everywhere. And when you get done with Earth, you're probably going to say, okay, I'm going to go over to this other solar system over here and have some other experiences. You're constantly moving and to other schools and learning other things. But when you come to Earth, you have to be everything. And I do agree with what the other ones are saying. It's all happening at the same time. But I like to think of it linearly, because my mind can handle it better that way. Then you could get off into the other parts. But I have had people had lives in every possible form you can think of. And I have not yet had anyone come to me who has not had a past life of some form. People always say, how do you believe in this? Because I said I haven't found anybody yet who has not experienced a past life. So it has to mean something. Like, with PMH, to me, that's science, I think. If I do the same procedure thousands of times and get the same results, to me, that's scientific evidence. That's what I believe, anyway. Would you agree? If it's a provable thing, they won't agree. I know the scientists wouldn't agree, but to me, I think it's...
You've reached a point of consideration.
Okay. If everyone comes up with the same thing, I think it has to mean something. Because that's what they do in scientific experiments. They do the same thing over and over, looking for the same results. Okay. You're going to consider it anyway. Okay. But anyway, to me, I think it's provable that I know everyone has had past lives. But okay, let's put it in a linear progression. First, you have to be everything. First, you have to be air. You have to know what everything is like. And I had my first exposed to that was in the book Legacy from the Stars. A man wanted to go back to his first life he'd ever lived on Earth. I thought he was going to go back to a caveman or something. He went back to where the Earth was still forming, where they had volcanoes erupting, ammonia in the air, and you couldn't have any life here at that time. He was part of the air along with others cleaning the ammonia out of the atmosphere. But yet he had a personality. He could converse with me. And when he wasn't doing that, he was swimming in and out of the lava and having a great time. So we have to know what it's like to be, I don't know what you would call it, chemicals, elements, whatever. Well, then we have to go to, what would it be like to be a rock? Now, I've got a whole section in the new book on people who have had all of these lives at different things. Being a rock is very slow. Everything is alive. Everything is vibrating at a different rate. Rocks are vibrating very, very slow. So they didn't, you don't think you're going to stay in these lives very long, but you have to know what it's like. And then they would go into lives where they were plants. And I've had to be an acorn, I've had to be a rose. He said, being a rose is beautiful, but it doesn't last very long. But what would it be like? Because we have to, if we understand this, we will realize we've been all of these things. We're all one. We would take better care of our earth if we realized we're all part of everything. So what would it be like to be a plant? Okay, then what would it be like to be an animal? What would it be like to be a wolf and be able to run? What would it be like to be a bird, be able to fly? I've got wonderful stories in the new book of how an eagle sees, how a spider sees. Because I want to know these things. And there are things the scientists don't know, because how do they know what goes on in the brains of these creatures? So that's what I'm writing about in this new part. All these experiences I've had where people have been these different animals and plants and things. But there was something there that they needed to know, that they needed to learn. Okay. Then there is also the little people, what we call the keepers of the plants. Every culture has these. The nature spirits, the nature, what do you call them, the dryads, the nymphs, the fairies, all of those. They are all over the world. These are the keepers of nature. The plants and the animals. We have all been these things also. So we're having all of these different things that we're a part of. Eventually, we're going to get into the humans. I needed a drink here. Okay. You won't believe the energy I feel coming off this audience. Sometimes that happens. Why do you think I sit down? Makes me a smaller target. Because after a while when I'm doing this, I think it has to do with focus, when everybody's focusing on the speaker. And now I see what PMH like to walk around, you know. And I started sitting down a long time ago, because after a while you begin to feel waves of energy and heat. And I was getting very hot, so it was coming off the audience. So I say that, now let's spell it for a little bit, okay. But then when you get to be a human, you've got to be everything. You've got to be male and female many, many times. And there's many people, a man will say, what do you mean? I've always been a man, I've never been a woman. What would you learn if you were only one sex? You wouldn't learn very much. You have to know what it's like to be everything. Have to experience back and forth. And I could do a whole lectures on all of these things, but I don't want to go into all the parts of it. But you have to be rich and poor. You have to live on every continent in the world. You have to be every religion in the world. You have to be every race in the world. Because how are you going to know what it's like if you are not? You must experience every side of every coin, of every situation before you're done. Sometimes this will happen in one life alone. You'll have many of these different things that you'll go through. But you have to experience it all before you're finished. And in between all of these lives, you're going back and forth to the spirit side. And the spirit side is vibration and frequencies, because as you go back and forth, you will go back to the frequency or vibration you're compatible with. You can't go any higher until you have reached that vibration. That's why you try to improve yourself on earth so the next time you go back, you're going to go to a little higher level. And the idea is to keep going higher and higher till finally you're not going to have to come back anymore. Then we can return back to God, back home, with all of the knowledge we have accumulated, however long that's going to take. That's why I said we're like cells in the body of God, traveling and bringing everything back to the source. So that's what a strange thing has been happening in my work now. Instead of going back to past lives, what I've come to the conclusion is the ones who are going back to past lives still have karma that needs to be repaid, and they're going to have to work it out. And that's why they're still getting that. The majority of the people that are coming to see me now have gone past that, I guess, because when I put them under, they will go back to the source, and they will be coming directly from the source into this life now. Or sometimes they will be some other kind of an alien life form who is coming here for the first time to experience life on Earth. And when they get to the subconscious part, I'll say, I thought we were going to go to past lives. And they said, it's not necessary anymore, not needed anymore, irrelevant, kindergarten stuff. It's been there, done that. They said, yeah, we could have gone through that, but what's the use? You've gone past it. You don't need it anymore. That's all old hat stuff. Hopefully you've worked it all out. So they said, you don't need that. Now they want us to focus on now and moving into the future. This is happening again and again and again. This is how I see my work evolving. It's changing in the work I'm doing. They're no longer going back that way. Okay. This is what I found now about the new Earth. You have to understand about dimensions. This goes along with these parallel lives and all of that. There are dimensions around us all the time. They're invisible to us, but they have peoples, they have cities, they are civilizations. They're all vibrating at different frequencies. That's why they're invisible to us. Just like a propeller or a fan blade, when it speeds up, the frequency increases, becomes invisible. These other dimensions are vibrating at a different frequency that makes them invisible. This is how the ETs travel back and forth. They change the vibration of the craft to disappear when they go into the other dimension. A lot of people will see them appearing and just vanishing. This is what's happening. They speed up the vibration of the craft and disappear. And I've worked with UFOs and I've done a lot of information about how they travel and all of that. But it has to do with dimensions that are around us all the time. We are constantly moving in and out of these dimensions without even knowing about it. We think this world, believe me, is not real. It is all vibrating at different frequencies anyway. One thing I want to say there, all of this is an illusion, they say. Nothing is real. It's only an illusion, like you're living in the middle of a dream. In the Convoluted 2, I had the chapter called The Dreamer Dreams the Dream. And I've got some more on it in the new book, too. That when I have somebody go through the death experience, I've had this happen many times, they'll go through the death experience in a past life, and they're moving out of it, and they're looking back, and they said, it was just a game. It was just a play. He said, I see the actors on the stage. I see the ones on the wings getting ready to come on stage and play their parts. It was just a game. It was just a play. But they said, when I was there, it seemed so real. But now that I'm here, it was like a blink of an eye. So we get caught in the illusion, which is easy to do. But they said if you can see it as an illusion and not get trapped in it, that's part of learning how to get out of all of this. But all of it is, we're creating it as we go. And it's all vibrations and frequencies. And everything is alive. They said absolutely everything has consciousness. This chair is alive. The clock's alive. The microphone's alive. They said Starbucks coffee is alive. Everything has a vibrational frequency. It's all energy and it's all alive. It all has consciousness and can be communicated with. This all takes a different mindset to look at it. But when they were talking about dimensions, I've been on the radio shows so much. I have my own radio show now, but I go on Art Bell. He'd be on there all night long. And we have hundreds and hundreds of phone calls. I think one time when I was on there, we had to take turns manning the phones all day and all night for a whole week. We could take turns sleeping to answer the phones. But now it's emails, and I know we got like 700 emails in one day. And people would be commenting on these different things that I said on the air. And some of it's humorous. Like I was speaking about Atlantis, and I got an email from an archaeologist. And she said, "How dare you go on the air and talk about something that there's not one shred of evidence that it ever existed?" And I was thinking, you're an archaeologist, where is your magic? And I told her, well, you know, half of the big discoveries in the world, nobody believed they exist. Look at Troy. They said the man had a dream, and he told him where to go. And a lot of the cities in the Bible were found by accident. That there never was any shred of evidence before that. That's kind of humorous. But I have wonderful emails about things that are happening in other dimensions that we don't realize. When you, have you ever had anybody tell you that they saw you somewhere and you were actually home? Because you were in and out of another dimension. And I've had some wonderful examples of that that have happened and that were proven. When the person was at a conference and somebody said they came into the conference and they said, well, we just left you over here. One was the racetrack that started up. And they said, well, it was on Hot Springs when the race season started. And they said they were sitting with them at the racetrack. And here they walked into the conference and the person was there. Because they had made a decision, should I go to the racetrack or should I come to the conference? Well, they were actually in both places. And so it was proven in that case. But I've had wonderful stories like that. They said, one woman said she was in a hotel. She went down to the street, walked out on the street. Everything was like it was 50 years ago. The people, the cars, everything was like 50 years ago. And it scared her. Nobody seemed to be noticing her. But after a while, she got scared, and the only way she could get back, she had to go back in the hotel and go back up the elevator. In fact, she was, to get back into this reality. And one girl said she came out of the college dormitory, and they were doing construction out in front of the dormitory. They had the pape up and the red cones and everything. They were tearing up the street. The next day when she comes out, there's no sign of any construction at all. Unless something happens to catch our eye and make us notice it, we don't realize we're constantly shifting in and out of dimensions. One man told me that he went out to the airport watching the jets take off. He saw the jet take off, then it went backwards, then it went forwards, then it went backwards before it finally took off. Then he saw another one do the same thing. Take off, go backwards, forwards. And then he watched the clouds in the sky. They were doing the same thing. Backwards and forwards. He goes out to the street. The cars are doing it, back and forth. And he wanted to know, what's happening here? The closest I could come to it was maybe he was at a juncture where the dimensions were not quite set. And he was kind of in that in-between part where they was all mixed up. But we've had sessions with people who have had strange experiences, and we've had them explain what these were. But one that I think was really amazing, and I'm probably going to go over 9. Is that okay? Because I want to finish these points. Okay. I was afraid I would. I was trying to keep it condensed. But one I think was really important on the Art Bell show. I got an email from about these 3 women. Now, you know the Art Bell show goes on all night long, and you have to talk all night long. Some people don't want to stay up to listen to it, so they had these tape recorders that are very slow, and they turned those on so they could record the whole show, and then the next morning they play it back. Well, they said 3 women were friends in Tennessee. They were recording the show. The next morning they got up. The one woman said, "It show wasn't on there. It was a sporting event." And she calls the radio station, and they said, "Oh, we're not carrying Art Bell anymore. We don't care how many people protest. We're not going to carry it." And her friend got the same thing. She got this sporting event. The third woman got the show. On all 3 tapes, the same call letters were given of the station. They were all listening to the same radio station. 2 of them didn't get it, and 1 of them did. And then they said in there, they are carrying Art Bell again now. Now, what happened? Were they living over here in a dimension where it didn't exist, and this other one was over here where it was being broadcast? We tried to explain it, but a week or so after I got the email and I answered it, I was speaking at a Unity church in Memphis. These 3 women drove from Nashville, and they were older women, and they said, "We just wanted to come and tell you this really did happen, and we have the tapes to prove it." Now, isn't this an example of, I think, going in and out of dimensions? I don't know. I think that's what happened to PMH's ticket. She was trying to get here, and the airlines told her there is no such plane, no such flight. I think it existed in this other dimension. We're still going to track that out. But this is what I mean about dimensions. You're going to have to understand this before you're going to understand the part about the new earth. Because things are speeding up. Vibrations and frequencies are increasing. Because we are getting ready to move into the new earth. This earth has got to the point where we can't live here anymore. Too low, and also we're polluting the earth. We are overpopulating, but we're polluting, we're contaminating our foods. It's just getting to the point it can't not sustain life anymore. Now, one thing they told me was, whenever we exploded the atomic bomb, back in the late 40s and 50s. Right after that time, suddenly there was this influx of UFOs activity. They said it was because we exploded the atomic bomb. And they leave us alone. That's the law of free will and non-interference. They were leaving us alone. See, because UFOs are not what you think anyway. A lot of them are directly connected with all of this stuff that's going on with the source and with these messengers. It's more to it than you think. But anyway, they had to come and see, what are these kids up to down here? Because they saw that we were developing atomic power, and here we had these explosions going off. And they said, we can't allow this, because these kids are playing around with something they don't understand. But we got free will. What are we going to do about it? They also knew we were so into karma that we were going round and around and around. We weren't getting off of it. We were so bogged down. We were never going to be able to shift into the new dimension, because the new dimension requires our bodies to also shift with it. So anyway, what they said happened. When they saw what we were doing, they couldn't interfere. And not allowed to interfere from the outside. Otherwise, they just come down and say, "Hey guys, you can't do this," and they would have stopped us from doing it. You're going to destroy the world. You're going to see, because if anything happens here, it ripples through the whole cosmos. It affects all the other planets. It can affect the whole dimension system. They cannot allow us to blow this planet up, because it would cause too much wide-ranging effects. So this is why all of this is all intertwined. But they can't interfere in the workings of a civilization from the outside. So what they decided to do to help us, help ourselves to get out of this mess, they said, we will work from the inside. And the call went out. Anybody wants to volunteer and come and help these kids? And that's what I'm getting now, because when I have people going back to the source, I'll say, well, what made you decide to leave if it was so beautiful? And they said, we heard the call, and we decided to volunteer. And many of them were coming in for the first time. And boy, they don't like it. And also the ETs, different life forms, they'll say, well, they asked us, do you want to go and help? So they had to change bodies, and they said, this body, I don't like it at all. But the way they're doing it, they were coming in as babies, working from the inside. The new vibration, the new frequency. Now what I'm getting is even stranger, that I'll be writing about in the new book. It is totally unexpected, because this is happening. We're going into it now. They can't take the time to come in as babies. They're coming in with two adults, but it's happening with permission when the person has a near-death experience. At that moment, they said, with the permission, if the soul wants to go on, they can enter the body and do their work. And they said, they have 2 minutes is all they've got to make the exchange. I don't know if this sounds right to you, but this is what they said, that they're allowed to do it because they're here to help, and the other soul wanted to go on. It wasn't happy here. It's like a walk-in, except it's a different kind of a walk-in. That this is a different soul. In a walk-in, the person knows the soul that is going to do the exchange. In this case, it's not someone that they knew before, and they're allowed to come in. And sometimes even when a baby is born and it's not going to live, they can make the exchange at that time. But the idea is to get in here with fresh, new souls that are not bogged down in all of this karma, because they've got to change the world. We're not doing it. Now, I've found 3 waves of people that have come in. And this goes way back to the beginning of my work, and now I'm beginning to put it all together. The first wave are now, it's filled in the book, The Keepers of the Garden, as an example, about, he's just turned 50. They're in their late 40s and just beginning to go 50, usually in the 40s. They are the ones who have had the most difficult time adjusting. I get so many letters from these people all over the world. They say, I don't want to be here, I don't like it here, I don't belong here, I want to go home, I don't know where home is. They got good lives, they've got good families, they've got good jobs, but they don't want to be here. Many times they try to commit suicide, as Phil did in that book. And it's because they don't want to be here. And after our book began to go all around the world, people began writing me and saying, I thought I was the only person in the world that felt that way. But now they're finding they're not alone. And now I'm getting this all the time. People are under, they will say, this is my first time on earth. I came as a volunteer and I don't want to be here. And I call these the first timers, but that's the first wave. They had the most difficult time of all because it was very hard to adjust to being here. You imagine, this is not a good place to be. We have all this violence. They don't understand violence. They don't want to be here. They don't like what we are doing to the earth. So that's the first wave. They had the hardest time adjusting. The second wave that I'm finding are those that are now in their 20s, 30s. They are having an easier time. And when I'm talking to them while they're under, they will say, this is also their first time on earth, but they will say, I'm an antenna. I'm a channel of energy. I'm an antenna. I'm here to receive energy and spread it out to the world at this time. They don't have to do anything else. And most of the time, they live very simple lives. They don't have any problems. They're very easygoing. Sometimes they work out of their house. They don't even have to go out for a job. They will get married, but a lot of them won't have children because having children would create karma and tie them here. If we want to get in, do our job, and get out. We don't want to be stuck in this situation. Those are the second group. And they have an easier time because they were adapting easier. I asked them one time, why did the first group have such a hard time? They said because they were the pathfinders, the way showers. They had to blaze the trail for the other ones to follow as they came. And then the third wave are the new children. They're coming in with everything already in place, and it's not as difficult as the first ones that came in. And the DNA has been changed. Now, our DNA is being changed now because we have to be able to shift with this whole thing. They said if we hadn't changed your DNA, you would probably die by now. Either that or you would be very sick because of what they're doing to the food, what they're doing to the atmosphere. They have to help our bodies adapt to our environment and our surroundings. And they do this by helping with the DNA. They said the body is an amazing machine. It is amazing resilience to it. It can handle anything, absolutely anything in small doses. But too much, and the body can't handle it, it would die. And that's why they have to make the body adapt, and we're constantly having this happen. The new children are coming in with all of this already in place. The DNA is there. Ours are being changed as the vibrations and the frequencies increase. The older people are having the most difficult time because their bodies are having to adjust, have a harder time adjusting to the frequency changes. Now, as we shift into this new dimension, that's why I wanted you to understand about dimensions. As we shift into the new dimension, the whole earth is changing. It's changing its frequency. It's changing its vibration. I have heard the tone of the earth. They have it on tape recordings that they broadcast from the space stations. The earth has a tone. That tone is changing. It is increasing. That's one sign that they know something is going on with the frequency of the earth. And they're noticing a lot of this. You know, when they had the tsunami, the earth did move. There's a lot of things happening with the earth. We have to shift and change vibration because it's got to get away from this, all this stuff. We are destroying the earth. And they said we can no longer be here. We have to go into the new earth. In order for us to move with the new earth, our bodies have to change. We have to change frequency and vibration. And I'm hoping I'm not going over too many people's heads, but I'm just throwing this out to think about it anyway. Our bodies have to change vibration and frequency. They cannot change suddenly because the body couldn't handle it, it would die. It'd be too much of a jolt to the system. So over time, it started about 2 years ago, our bodies are gradually adapting and changing the frequency of our bodies. It gets to a little point and it'll level off, and then after a while it'll do it again. Each time it does it, you notice physical effects to the body. A lot of people go to doctors, the doctors can't find anything wrong with them because it is the body adjusting to these new frequencies. Some of the problems they say are, heart palpitations, high blood pressure, depression, joint pain, muscle pain. It's things like this as the body is adapting to the new frequency and vibration. But then some people feel it more than others, and then it'll level off, and after a few months or so, it'll do it again. And this is as we adapt to this. They said if you were to examine the DNA in the body now, you would find a big difference. They said the doctors are going off of the old information, what they've been taught in school. Our cells are receiving new information constantly as we adapt to this. They don't understand that. So when they try to help you, it's not working because they don't understand what's really happening to the body. And a lot of people said are not allowed to get sick because they don't want them probing around in their bodies. But anyway, this is what's happening as we are adapting, and it's gradually moving. It can't happen suddenly, but the earth is moving into this new frequency. The tsunamis, the earthquakes, the storms, all of this is the earth as it's making these adaptations. And it wants to get rid of us, really. It's tired of us. They say it's like a dog trying to shake the fleas off because of what we've been doing to the earth. And it really wants us out of the picture. Now, the ones who are going to move into the new earth is going to be something you won't believe. It is so beautiful and wonderful. Now remember, this information comes from many, many people that I've worked with, and I just put it together like a puzzle. The new earth is extremely beautiful. In the Bible, it's described as the 1,000 years of peace, when everything is perfect. You know, in the book of Revelation, when it talks about the new heaven and the new earth, and some will be left and some will be taken, this is what it's talking about. It's shifting into the new earth. Now, those who will move to live on the new earth are those whose vibrations are being allowed to shift with it. Those who can't change will stay with the old earth and all of the horror that's going to be happening on the old earth. And they said, you want to move and don't look back, because they said this is something you don't want to see, that it's going to be very, very bad. But they said some will be left behind. And I said, that sounds cruel. And they said, not really, it's their own decision. Everybody has to make their own decision. Do you want to stay with what you have created, or do you want to move into this new earth that's being prepared? But they said, you must make the decision, because you can't shift your vibration that quickly. You have to make the decision, are you going to go or are you going to stay? And that's what they mean by being left behind. And those who are very much into karma will not be able to move, because they still have to, these are laws, they have to pay this off. And they're not going to be allowed to move into the new earth until they get rid of the old karma. Those people will stay with the old earth. Then when they die, they will be sent to another place, another planet that still has negative karma, so they can repay it there. They will not be allowed to come back to the new earth because it will have changed too much. There was no place for those kind of people. It does sound cruel, but they said it's their own decision, they're making up their own mind, and they will stay in the reality they have created. I was telling about this at an ashram in the Bahamas a few months ago, and this one woman said, but I'd want to stay and help them, the ones that are left behind. I said, you don't want to move on? She said, no, somebody's going to have to help them. But they said they've done this themselves. And they said, even if you wanted to stay, once the shift is completed and the vibrations are complete, you can't. You will move with it. You won't be able to stay with the others. And you know, even the Bible, it says, two workers working in the field, one will be taken and one will be left. Two people sleeping together, one will be taken and one will be left. That's what they mean. Some will stay and some will move on. And I've gone over and over this so much. I had some about it in Convoluted 2. And I'm getting more about it now as I'm trying to understand all these parts to this. They said we can't fully explain it because we don't know what's going to happen. It's never happened before in the history of a planet. that an entire planet has moved at one time. It's never happened before, so they said, we don't know what's going to happen. But the whole universe is watching because this is going to be a very momentous occasion for the world. So nobody really knows what's going to happen until it does happen. Now, when I did the lecture in one place, well, do you know Annie Kirkwood? Remember she did Mary's Message to the World? You don't hear much about her anymore, but she used to be on the lecture circuit. Annie Kirkwood, who did Mary's Message to the World. We used to do a lot of lectures together. We did panels, and we were on a panel, they were talking about earth changes. She told everybody about a vision that she had of the earth doing this. This was several years ago. She said in the vision, she saw the earth. Then she saw the earth begin to pull apart like a cell dividing as it starts to pull apart. As it pulled apart, then it snapped apart and there were two earths side by side. Over here on this one, she heard them saying, we did it, we did it, we did it. Over here, she heard them saying, poor thing, she died believing all that. One is not going to be aware of the other. They won't even be aware anything has happened. Some of this takes a lot of thinking around to bend your minds around. But that's what they said. They won't even be aware. Now, which one will you move to? Do you want to move with the new earth, or do you want to stay with the old earth, which is going to be, they said, you can't even believe what it's going to be like. They said, if you could magnify Katrina 100 times happening in many cities all over the world, this is going to be an example of what it's going to be like. People running and screaming in the streets. And I don't want to be with that. And this woman saying she wanted to stay and help, well, they say you're not going to be able to anyway. If you have evolved where your vibration is strong enough, you will make the jump and move to the other one. But when I was given this lecture at some hall one time, afterwards this man came up to me and he said, now I'm a businessman. I'm an engineer. He said, I don't have things happen to me. But he said, I was sitting in the audience when you were making that description about the two earths splitting apart. He said, suddenly I was out of the auditorium, I was in outer space. And I saw it happening, just like you said it did. And when he came back, he told me, he said, I'm going to go home and work this up on the computer. And he did. He sent it to me, what he saw, and I put it in convoluted 2. He had two earths over the top. One was over the top of each other. One was glowing, and the other one was the ordinary one. And that was what he saw as it made the separation between the two. But I thought that was funny. So all of a sudden, he's in outer space watching this happen. Now, some of this is a little hard to believe, but they said, it's happening, and there's no way we're going to turn it back. But we have to, because the earth can no longer exist the way it is. We have to move into something else. And sometimes afterwards, people will be talking about it. This one man said, oh, I'm excited, I want to go, because it's supposed to be so beautiful you can't imagine. And then there's other people who said, yeah, but what about my husband? What about my daughter? And he was telling them the same thing. They have to each make their own decision. But when you first make the shift into the new world, you won't really realize anything has happened. You'll still have your physical body. Things will seem different, but it won't really be apparent to you at first. And then gradually, you won't need your body anymore, and you will turn into an energy light body. So we are evolving to that point. But at that point, we won't need food, we won't need anything. And they said, when you get to this point after you make the shift, nobody will be sick, there won't be any death. It's going to be a perfect world, they say. But another thing I think is funny is I have so many people coming to me who are either healers or they want to be healers. I mean, it's just about everybody that walks through that door. It's a huge number. A lot of them are working with Reiki, with energy, uh, healing, all kinds of different modalities. And they're all working with energy and different healing. And other ones, when they're under, when they ask for their purpose is going to be, they said, you must go and heal. You must learn healing. They never tell you your purpose is to have a good time and go get drunk and, have sex and party. They always tell the people their purpose is to help each other, especially to learn some kind of thing that will be able to work with other people. They're always saying, we want you to learn to heal. And I asked them one time, what are you going to do with all these healers if everybody's going to be a healer? And they said, well, imagine a world like Katrina was, and all of a sudden there's no doctors, there's no hospitals, everything's shut down. What are you going to do? You're going to have to depend on each other. And then whenever we move into the new world, there won't be any need for it because we will know how to heal ourselves. We will have gone to that point. So some of these things are kind of mind-bending. They're a little hard to understand. I probably left a lot out, but I'm putting more and more of it in the book, and all I say is just read it. This is what they're saying is happening. But if you are noticing your body's acting funny, a lot of it could be this shifting, and the vibrations and the frequencies of your body are moving with it. But these new kids are the ones that are coming in that are going to be helping everybody because they're already got everything in place. But they're always talking about the year 2012. Well, I've also had a chapter in the book about, this has happened before with other civilizations, and I'm almost finished here. Other civilizations down through history that have disappeared. The Mayans were one that disappeared. The whole thing, nobody knew where they went. There were other Indian tribes in America that have disappeared. Nobody knew where they went. Well, they said they reached the point of evolution where the whole civilization shifted en masse. The same thing we're going to do. And I had one session where a woman went back to where she was with one of these Indian groups when they all decided to shift en masse to another dimension. And she was sent back now to help during this time. But they said the Mayans were so advanced that they knew how to do this. They could see ahead to where the next really big shift was going to occur when the entire Earth would move at once. And that was when they saw it happening around the year 2012. That's why the calendar stops at that time. But we're already in the middle of it. It's been going on for about the last 2 or 3 years. It's happening faster now. Time is speeding up. Everything is happening quicker now. You can feel it in your bodies. You know it's happening in time. We're moving faster and faster into this. By the year 2012, they said we should be reaching the peak. It's not over at that time, but it's only a few more years. We're noticing more and more things happening. A lot of the stuff happening to the world right now is the world getting rid of all this old karma. Because the earth has karma too. It's a living being. But as we move into this, toward the year 2012, you'll be seeing a lot more changes, and we will be reaching the peak to where we'll make the split. But they're not really sure how or when it's going to happen, but it's going to be around that time. But it has to, they said, because it's this evolutionary process. We're evolving, the world is evolving, everything is happening. Something to think about anyway. But in the meantime, you've got to live your lives the best way you can. Get rid of all the old karma, because that'll hold you back and keep you here. Forgive people. The quickest way, but not the easiest way, to get rid of karma is to forgive. Let it go. Let it go. There's no sense in holding on to it. It holds you back. It holds them back. I've had people tell me, I can't forgive them. You don't know what they did to me. And they end up, this is what makes them sick. They hold on to it. Causes cancer especially. They've got to, it's not important. Let it go. Tear up the contract. You don't need to work with these people anymore. Forgive them. Release it. Let it go. We got more important things to do. We're moving into a whole new world out here. We don't need that other. That's what we're supposed to be focusing on. Get rid of the old karma. Don't make any more. Treat people the way you would want to be treated. And let go of fear. Fear holds you back. Don't believe everything that's on TV. Don't believe everything that's in the newspapers. Think for yourself. Let go of the fear. Let go of the karma so you can move. Change your vibration. Does this scare you, what I've been saying? Okay. I've always been a little worried about telling audiences these things, but they said this is one of the most important things they want me to talk about right now to get people prepared. So anyway, this will be in the new book. It's part of it, and there's even more stuff that I can't even go into. The last session I had in Montreal, they came through with a whole new concept, and I was thinking, wait a minute, guys, I just got through with this, you know? And I was asking questions trying to understand it, and they said, if you ask that question, that means you're not ready for us to give you the next part. You got to digest this first. And I thought, okay. So I'm thinking about ending the book there. I don't know. But I think I want to continue to get more and more information. That boggles my mind anyway. Anyhow, that's what I wanted to bring you to is the New Earth and what I've got on it. There's a lot more I haven't even talked about that'll be the New Earth. And give me something to think about in the new books. Something to think about anyway. Okay. We went a little over, but I think it was important to finish it. And thank you for coming.